Guys, so I'm here tonight to do a review of Deadline by Mira Grant. This is book 2 in her Newsflesh Trilogy. I've already done a review of book 1, which is called Feed, and I will leave a link down in the drop-down box. So the Newsflesh Trilogy, in a nutshell, is a near-future, post-apocalyptic zombie adventure that has very, very little to do with the actual zombies. It's much more of a character-driven story, whereas exploring how humanity attempts to live in a world after the zombie apocalypse. Now, Feed was very much sort of a political thriller, where we had our intrepid bloggers, Georgia and Sean Mason, and the rest of the crew from After the End Times, went on the road with Peter Ryman, who was campaigning to become president of the United States. This book, the second book, is much more of a revenge/medical thriller, and this book is also much more action-packed. A lot of people thought Feed was a little slow in certain parts. I am not one of those people. I loved every single word of that book, but I can understand how some people might have thought it slowed down a little bit towards the middle. I loved everything about it. There was never a point when I felt bored by the story. But this book is 10 times more action-packed than the first one, and her writing style has also improved greatly. I loved Feed, but I have to say that Deadline is about 20 times better, in my opinion. It is my favorite book of the trilogy, and there are just so many reasons why I love this book, which I will get more into in the spoiler section of this video. So, Deadline picks up a couple of months after the end of the events that happened at the end of Feed, and our main protagonist and narrator of the book is in a very, very, very bad way. There were several times while I was reading this book that I was genuinely concerned that they would not make it to the end of this book, and that had nothing to do with the zombies, but more to do with their emotional and mental state. Mira Grant has this way of just making you feel for the characters, making you feel like you know them and are experiencing these things that they're going through with them, and she just has this brilliantly beautiful way of writing. And considering this is in actuality, technically a zombie novel, the way that you end up feeling about these characters is quite remarkable, in my opinion. We also have several new characters that get introduced in this book, because unfortunately many of the characters that were in book 1 are no longer around. And I have to say, at the beginning, I was a little hesitant about some of the new characters. I didn't know how it was going to feel. But within about maybe 30 pages of the book, I was accepting them and liking most of them, if not all. Again, I will get more into that in the spoiler section of the video. But yes, so this book was much more action-packed, and let me just tell you right now, make sure you have book 3 when you read this book, because this ends with a monster of a cliffhanger. Because once again, I am just so grateful that I did not start reading these books until all 3 were published, because if I got to the end of this book and had to wait a year for the 3rd book to come out, I really would have hurt someone. So yeah. And that, unfortunately, guys, is all I can say as far as spoiler-free content, alright? Because really, it's next to impossible to say very much about this book without giving away things that happened in Feed and things that obviously happen in this book. So if you have not read if you've not read this book or Feed and you plan on it and you don't want to be spoiled, I implore you to please stop this video, go away, read the series, come back, and then let me know what you think of it after you've read it, because I do not want to spoil this series and the storyline to anyone who has not read it yet, because it is just so fantastic and I don't want to ruin it for anyone. But for those of you who have read the books, stay tuned for some spoilery discussion beginning now. Okay, so at the end of Feed, we all know what a sucker punch it was to find out that Georgia had been infected and Sean ends up having to kill her. And so because we don't have Georgia as narrator anymore, the focus and the viewpoint is now through Sean's point of view. And Sean was a character that I really, really loved in Feed, but I have to say, my love for this character increased exponentially by reading this book, not only because we had his point of view, but because we got to know his character so much more. The first book was much more about Georgia and seeing things through her eyes, but this book is totally Sean's book, and I think that's part of the reason why it's my favorite of the series, because he's just such a fantastic character. You can empathize with him, you feel for him, you know how much he misses Georgia, and you just know. That's why I said, I seriously, there were several times when I just wondered if he would end up killing himself in this book, because I didn't think he would be able to live without Georgia. And the fact that he's just hell-bent on getting revenge for whoever caused George's death was just, he's just such a fantastic character. And I've said this in other videos, but I will state it right here for the record. Sean Mason has become my absolute #1 book boyfriend. He has dethroned who I thought would never be dethroned, Dex Foray from the Experiment in Terror series. I will always love Dex, but Sean is now the king. Now, I am one of those people who didn't really think too hard about the whole cloning aspect of the book, as far as, it being a gateway for them to bring Georgia back into the story. Maybe I'm stupid, maybe I'm just not very observant. Usually I pick up on stuff like this. I know a lot of people, I've read a lot of reviews where people said that as soon as the cloning aspect was brought up, they immediately knew that's how that they were going to bring back Georgia. But it didn't occur to me, and I thought it was a very inventive, very ingenious plot point, in my opinion. And I thought it was handled really well, because I think it could have come off as very silly and far-fetched and kind of ridiculous, but I think she handled it in a way that was very believable and sort of scarily believable. It's impossible to talk about this book without mentioning the scene between Sean and Bex. The scene where Sean ends up having sex with Bex, and he calls her Georgia afterwards. Many people were very, very skeeved out by that. I was not one of them. I might be going to hell for this, but I said this in my first review, in my review of Feed. I always felt that Georgia and Sean's relationship felt much closer than a brother-sister type thing. Yes, they're adopted. Remember that they're adopted before you just start screaming and running away in terror. I just felt like it was more of like a married couple, boyfriend-girlfriend type thing. That was just me. So I was not skeeved out by the whole thing. And really, the way that it's written in the book, I think it's because he misses her so much. It wasn't a sexual thing, at least that's how I took it. So I was not one of the ones that was skeeved out. Now, having said that, I am not a fan of the character of Bex. I am very much in the minority. I know she's one of the most popular characters from the series. I never liked her, except I sort of thawed to her at the end of the third book. But I really did not like her at all in this book. I thought she acted very childish, because the whole point when she came on to Sean, she said, I don't want to go steady. I don't want you as my boyfriend. I just want to feel alive because we almost died. And then what does she turn around and do? She totally acts like a spurned girlfriend and all jealous, and she just, she's supposed to be this badass, and then she turns around and she acts all girly and weak, and it really aggravated me. So that, if I could find fault with any of the 3 books, that is the only fault I can find, is just her character and her reaction to what happened with Sean. So there you go. As for the ending, like I said, I didn't pick up on the whole cloning thing, so at the very end, when we find out that Georgia has been brought back, I was floored. I'm trying really hard not to curse. You can probably tell. Yeah, I was just, I didn't know what to do with myself, which is why I said you need to have book 3 ready when you finish this book, because talk about probably one of the most crazy, insane cliffhangers I have come across in a very long time. Yeah, so anyway, you guys, I am so incredibly obsessed with this series. This has sort of taken over my life over the last few weeks. I finished book 3 about 3 or 4 days ago, and you know what I did when I finished book 3? I turned around and I started reading Feed again. I have never done that before. I have never finished a series and then immediately started reading it again. So that has to tell you how much I love it. So this book hands down my favorite in the series. Um, it's right now it is tied as, or it is pretty much tied as my favorite book of 2013. It's probably going to end up being number 2 next to Painted Faces. So that's how much I love it. It's just fantastic, and I can't recommend this series highly enough. It's just brilliant on all levels. So let me know what you think. If you've read it, tell me your thoughts. Tell me what you thought of having Sean as the narrator this time, if you preferred his narration or George's. If you thought this book was much more emotionally, if you connected more with this book than you did with Feed because of having Sean telling his story and getting to know his character more, just give me your thoughts. Tell me what you think. And I am getting ready to film a video review for book 3, so look out for that. It'll probably be up in a few days. So until next time, you guys, thanks always for watching. I really hope you listened to me and didn't spoil yourself by watching the rest of this video if you haven't read these books. But until next time, you guys, thanks for watching. Hi to all my new subscribers, and I will talk to you very, very soon. Happy reading!